Okay, sure.
From on the last chapter.
Yes.
And let 7 periods of time pass over him. How long is 7 periods of time?
The word time in Daniel is often interpreted as being 1 year.
Okay.
So let me show you that in the text. Go to Daniel chapter 12, just a second. Daniel chapter 12, and take a look at verse 7, I'm thinking is what it is. Yes, 7. So this ain't going to make much sense, but we'll just read it. The man clothed in linen, who was upstream, raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by the one who lives forever that it would be for a time, 2 times, and half a time. What does that equate to if you add all those up? A time, 2 times, and half a time.
Time. 2 and a half.
Well, 3.5, because you add
3.5.
add 1 to the 2, and then you get 3.5. Okay. All right. Now go down to verse 12. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days.
Yeah.
So let's just, what is 1,335 divided by 365?
3.5.
That's right, 3.5. You got it.
Oh, wow.
So
I've read it and it didn't compute.
well, now you see it though, and so that's where we get okay. So 1 time is 1 year,
Okay.
is the basic idea. Let me show you another passage that's might be of interest to you here. Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. Somebody read verses 1 through 3. Revelation 11, verses 1 through 3.
Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
Okay, 42 months. Guess how many years that is? That's 3.5 years. A time's time and half a time. And so,
Wonder what the.
and then
It's just one of his favorite combinations.
1,260 days is 42 months. A time's time and half time. 3.5 years. So let me give you an idea here. He says that he measures the temple of God in verse 1. He says that it's given over to the nations in verse 2, and they'll trample over the holy city for 42 months. In history, from the beginning of the Jewish-Roman War to the destruction of the temple was 3.5 years.
Sometimes called the Dark Ages.
The Dark Ages?
Dark Ages. I don't know why I had a note there that was sometimes called the Dark Ages. I don't know why I wrote that down. I got it somewhere.
I don't know. Well, the Dark Ages is more like the like middle.
Medieval.
Yeah, the time kind of between the.
It's when the Catholic Church took the Bible out of everybody's hands, and we were in darkness for 1,000 years.
Right.
So
well,
I don't know why
Nobody was
I
allowed to
had
have
that on
one.
there, do you know? I don't know
well,
why.
I'll tell you what. Because some people interpret all this as talking about the rise of Catholicism.
The what?
Rise of Catholicism,
Oh, okay.
and they interpret the beast in Revelation as being the Catholic Church and some other things.
Yeah.
But if you look at this and you think back to our study on the harlot from a few weeks ago, this seems to me to be talking about the fall of Jerusalem. I mean, the holy city
Right.
being destroyed for 3.5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Look down to verse 8 just for a second. He talks these 2 witnesses. Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. Where was Jesus crucified? In Jerusalem. So that makes more sense to interpret this as being Jerusalem from my perspective. But I do believe there is a connection between the 3.5 years of Daniel 12 and the 3.5 years of Revelation 11. But guess when we're going to talk about that? When we get to Daniel 12. But I did want to bring that out because I thought that is a good explanation for the times in Daniel chapter 4. So, anybody else have anything before?
Yes.
Okay, what you got, Miss D?
Exodus
Oh.
3.
Okay.
Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And the Lord said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live."
Okay.
Was this Jesus? Because he placed him on a rock, and when my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. So I was thinking maybe that was Jesus because he's the physical connection.
Yeah, it could be. That could be one interpretation of that. What verse are you in? Verse 23 there at the end?
Yes, I will remove my hand, and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
One of the things that people say here, or might argue against that, would say that, well, they could see Jesus face to face in John 1. And John chapter 1 says, let's see, let me read this passage to you. John chapter 1, verse 18, "No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." And so you might use that passage to say, well, this would have been the Son, not the Father. A manifestation of the Son, not the Father.
Right.
Because of that. And so, or this part here, you might, sorry, I got that backwards. You would say this is a manifestation of the Father, not the Son, because he says you can't see my face and live.
Right.
But we can see Jesus' face.
What about
Might be an
Genesis
argument.
32 and 30?
But I don't.
What does that mean?
Okay. Genesis 32:30. Oh, so Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved."
He didn't mean face to face, did he? I mean,
Well, they were wrestling.
yeah.
That's pretty face to face. But that was probably Jesus he was wrestling with.
Maybe so. It gets confusing, don't it?
Yeah.
It gets confusing.
Because over here it says you can't see anybody face to face.
I think
Yeah.
anytime there's a contact, a sighting, or like he put his hand and covered him, I think that's Jesus. Because it couldn't withstand God's presence unabated. They would die. Whether they looked at his face or not, I think it would have to be Jesus. He's a connection that makes it possible for us to connect to God. We have to go through him to get to God, because we wouldn't live. There's no way we could live.
Numbers 12 says that with Moses he speaks face to face.
As a friend.
But he explains it clearly and not in riddles, which means which means clear, not cloudy. He just tells them like it is, basically.
Right.
So face to face could be a figure of speech that means plainly, or being honest with them, or being up. We say being upfront with them.
Upfront.
What does that mean? You're right there at them.
Yeah.
You're not trying to go behind their back.
And you're only that way with friends.
Right. And so there's different interpretations of these passages. When he says, "I've seen God face to face, yet my life is preserved," is Jacob's words inspired there, or is the account of his words inspired? In other words, did he actually say that? The text reports that he actually said it. Or, like so many characters in Scripture, did he misunderstand, what he had experienced? Was it an angel that he wrestled with, and he interpreted that to be God? Was it Jesus that he was wrestling with, and he interpreted that to be God the Father, or however, Is it possible that Jacob didn't fully comprehend what exactly was happening there, Maybe. Again, it could be a manifestation of Jesus and not God the Father. And so there might be a distinction between that. Of course, in the Hebrew Scriptures, they had no concept of the Trinity, right, of the Godhead, like we do in the New Testament. And so there is that sort of complicates the matter, right? Yes. So they could have been speaking about something that they didn't know, and that's why we see the confusion between the passages. But really, it's just confusing. Really, that's just how it is. It's just confusing. I think we see in the Exodus account, though, that Miss D read for us, that nobody can see God the Father face to face in all of his glory in that way, at least at that time, and live to tell about it. So I think that kind of gives us the interpretive sort of tool and how we approach those other passages. Those other passages must be figurative in some way and not to be taken literally because of that passage in Exodus. You kind of use the easier passages to help you interpret the more difficult passages.
And someday we're going to understand this all.
Maybe. Or maybe someday we'll get to dive deeper than we thought we would. In 1 Corinthians 13, of course, it talks about seeing God face to face. But you see God face to face through Jesus. You know, it's coming to that understanding that Jesus is the exact representation of God's image. So.
But we will see him face to face.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the idea that you can't see God face to face without Jesus, you know? Maybe that you have to have Jesus to show you who God is before you can look at him.
Yes.
Okay, then I'll see him face to face. All right, Daniel chapter 5. Good questions today. Daniel chapter 5. Now we have Belshazzar, the king, and we have Belteshazzar, which is Daniel. So you got a "t" in there that differentiates the two. Don't get them confused. It offends them. People don't like you to mispronounce their names. All right, here we go. Somebody read verses 1 through 4. Not all at once. Mr. Tony, why don't you start?
Okay.
And then we'll just kind of go to Miss D next and go in a circle.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink thereof. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wife and his concubines, drank all in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, and iron, of wood, and stone.
All right, notice the repetitious nature of this passage. Just again, the vessels of gold and silver that they had taken out of the temple, and then it also repeats there his lords, his wives, his concubines. You know, he's showing that everybody was involved in this desecration of God's gold. I mean, think about that. They're taking the very utensils that were in the house of God and drinking wine out of them and getting intoxicated, and
then praising false gods.
And then praising false gods, exactly, while they're doing all this. And so we come immediately to verses 5 through 9, Miss D, if you could.
Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. The king called out for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought, and said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled.
What a buzzkill, you know,
Yeah.
literally, right? Yeah.
Haven't we been here before? The wise men didn't know a thing.
Daniel has had it, and he's going to tell him that here in a little bit. Daniel has lost his patience at this point, as we're going to see, as he had every right to. When his knees knocked together, I think of
That is so funny.
of Abbott and Costello, you know, like in one of their skits, or maybe Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, you know, their knees knocking together when they see one of those ghosts.
And he's the king, so it takes a lot to make his knees knock.
That's right. It takes the God of heaven to make his knees knock. Might be a way of saying it. Notice again, we have the opportunity to be made third in the kingdom, or to be placed higher up in the kingdom. So Daniel is about to be given the opportunity to have even more prestige. Although this is like being made CEO of a company that, is going to go under. Yeah. So, okay, 10 through 12. And we're going to see that the ladies typically are the ones who know what's actually going on and offer the words of wisdom to the fellas.
Always.
Yep. So go ahead and you can read that for us, Rita.
The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you, or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation.
So had they just listened to her the whole time, they probably would have been in a better...
That's right.
And notice she wasn't participating in the festivities.
Right.
That she came in from the outside and said, "What's all this commotion?"
And she was sober when she came in. They were all drunk.
She's definitely sober-minded,
Yeah.
at the least. How many problems in this world would have been avoided had the men just listened to the women?
95%, let's say.
Was she, my note says she was the queen mother, was she literally his mother? I mean, how?
Yeah, she said your father.
Yeah, from my understanding, is that it could kind of go either way, either his father or his grandfather.
See, I've seen notes that he was actually his grandson instead of his son.
Right, but they referred to it in the same kind of way.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking if she was his mother or his grandmother.
Well, if she was his grandmother, that'd make even more sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that she
'cause
knew about Daniel.
that she had that wisdom and and understanding.
She was there and she saw it, and they probably didn't remember any of that.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
Well, you'll see. It's actually they were there, which makes it even more embarrassing. Oh yeah, you'll see here in a second. So she says you should have brought Daniel in from the very beginning. In other words, so now we come to verse 13. Let's read, Miss Jean. Could you read verses 13 through 16?
Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Are you that Daniel who is one of the exiles from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? Now I have heard about you, that a spirit of God, of the gods, is in you, and that illumination, insight, and extraordinary wisdom have been found in you. Just now the wise men and the conjurers were brought in before me, that they might read the inscription and make its interpretation known to me. But they could not declare the interpretation of the message. But I personally have heard about you, and that you are able to give interpretations and solve difficult problems. Now if you are able to read the inscription and make its interpretation known to me, you will be clothed with purple and wear a necklace of gold around your neck, and you will have authority as the third ruler in the kingdom."
Wow. So now imagine Nebuchadnezzar is just holding, let's just come up with a scenario. This might not be historically accurate or whatever. But let's just say he's holding the same chalice that the high priest held. Just imagine. The best of the best, And while he's holding this, he's looking at Daniel and saying, "Oh, so you're one of the captives from Judah." Can you imagine Daniel just eyeballing that and going,
Maybe take a step back.
You have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea.
Lightning is going to strike.
I want to point out the repetition again. Anytime that you tell children's stories, you often use repetition, like in some of those, the three little pigs. You repeat, he huffed and he puffed and he blew his house down. You repeat those phrases so that the story will stick in their heads, right? And that's the same literary tool that's being used in here. A lot of these writings were read in the synagogue, kind of like the book of Leviticus. We pointed this out in that book as well. And so repetition is often used to make the story stick in their brains. So they can remember it better, they can recite it a little more easily, they can pass it down to more, further generations. And it also makes these points stick, that he doesn't leave any category out, right? Category out. Daniel's better than all of them, whether it was the astrologers, whether it was the Chaldeans, whether it was the wise men, whatever category you can think of, Daniel beat them all. And that's why these refrains show up again and again through the book of Daniel. Anytime you see repetition in Scripture, you ought to pay real close attention to why it's there. Sometimes it's just so you'll remember the story, and other times it has significance beyond that. Okay, my turn to read verses. I'm going to split this one up since it's a little bit longer of a paragraph here. I'll read 17 through 21, and then I'll let Mr. Tony read 22 and 23. Okay, 17. Then Daniel answered in the presence of the king. I love this. Let your gifts be for yourself, or give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I'll read the writing to the king and let him know the interpretation. As for you, O king, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar kingship, greatness, glory, and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. He killed those he wanted to kill, kept alive those he wanted to keep alive, honored those who wanted to honor, and degraded those who wanted to degrade. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he acted proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and his glory was stripped from him. He was driven from human society, and his mind was made like that of an animal. His dwelling was with the wild asses. He was fed grass like oxen, and his body was bathed with the dew of heaven, until he learned that the Most High God has sovereignty over the kingdom of mortals, and set over it whomever he will. Mr. Tony, 22 and 23, please.
And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, shall not humble thy heart, though thou knowest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of the house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them, and thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, and of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God is in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all the ways, hast not thou glorified? Then there was a part of his hand sent from
Oh, that's good there, Mr. Tony. Thank you. Appreciate that. I say you got a different version, so it's hard for me to know when it comes to an end there, but thank you for that. Okay, let's go over this text here. So Nebuchadnezzar was given all this power. Then he was taught a hard lesson, like we read last week. And notice verse 22. You, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all of this. So it wasn't that he was in the dark about it, or he just forgot. He had witnessed all this firsthand as being part of the royal family. I mean, he wasn't just a bystander. He was part of the royal family. I mean, this was his father or grandfather, and he had to deal with this on a personal level, And yet, he just looked at all that and said, oh, well,
They never did learn their lesson.
Think how many times this has happened.
Yeah.
Daniel 2, Daniel 3, Daniel 4, and now in Daniel 5, it's going to cost him the whole kingdom.
But in my younger days, after becoming a Christian, I thought, well, I can do this. He won't pay any attention to this. I'm trying real hard on other things.
Yeah.
He's blessed me in other ways, so he must still be pleased with me. And that was stupid. I mean, really stupid. Carried on for several years. And I thought, he's not going to overlook what I do. He's interested in doing the best for me, which means he won't let me get away with those things. He wants me to stop doing them.
Yeah,
it's
good to be able to see ourselves in the text, to be able to look at it and go, oh yeah, I see myself in that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're not going to get anything out of it, If you stand out at a distance and just have like a critical view of the characters, you're never going to allow it to convict yourself and go, wow, I'll do the same thing.
There's every nuance, every example of stupid in here.
Yeah, there is.
If we read it according to the way it applies to us.
Yeah.
Because you can't talk your way around him. What he says, if he tells you to do something, you can't talk your way out of it.
You can also think about this in a positive way, not just in a negative way. Like right now you're thinking, we should have learned a lesson and done right. But you can also flip it a little bit and go, well, how many times have I not trusted in God's goodness and allowed myself to worry,
Right.
or allowed myself to have anxiety?
Which is an act of no faith.
Yeah. So it could be acts like things that you did that were wrong, but it could also be, areas that you could have trusted in God more. And so we need to learn. Yeah, we need to learn from this story to look at the patterns of God and pay attention to Him, and trust in who He says that He is. Whether that is in doing what we're supposed to do, or in not doing what we're not supposed to do, or just in trusting Him whenever we come across problems in our lives.
One of my favorite things now, I tell him I can hardly wait to see how you're going to fix this.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And that dismisses me from interfering, because I do that a lot by injecting what I think or what I think the Bible teaches, or suggestions.
Yeah.
No, He's going to take care of this. Stand back, like He told Moses to tell the people at the Red Sea, stand still, shut up, and watch what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that's
And please don't write on the wall.
Yes.
Whatever you do.
And don't send anybody in to write on the wall.
Well, and we're about to read what he said there. So, Miss D, could you read 24 to 28? I don't know what your version says. Some versions translate these words differently, but it's something to the effect of mene tekel Perez or mene tekel parson. So, whatever your version says, just go for it.
This is what these words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That's pretty explicit.
It's pretty explicit.
Then
that's good. That's good there. That's good there. So, I mean, can you imagine seeing a human hand appear out of thin air and just writing something on the wall? I mean, we were talking about Scooby-Doo earlier. That happens in Scooby-Doo sometimes,
I don't know if I'd be in the same room very long.
Yeah, I don't know. But you can understand why his knees were knocking together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mene, tekel, parson. So, Mene, as Miss D said, the days of your kingdom are numbered and they've been brought to an end. Now, we already knew this in chapter 2, remember? Chapter 2 sets up the rhythm of the rest of the book of Daniel, because chapter 2 says gold is followed by silver, is followed by bronze, is followed by iron, is followed by iron and clay. So anytime we're reading in Daniel, especially when we get into chapters 7 through 12, we need to think about, where are we? Are we in the gold? Are we in the silver? Are we in the bronze? What's being discussed here? And that'll tell us the historical context of the prophecies, but it'll also tell us the timing of their fulfillment. It'll tell us when they were supposed to come about, and when the prophecies are forward-looking. This particular prophecy, God is just speaking for that night, that very night. So he says, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. This identifies who the silver in the statue is. This is who's coming next on the scene. Now, the other one that's going to be identified later are the Greeks, but we don't know that yet in the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
But we will see that later on. The only one that's not mentioned by name is Rome, and we'll see why that's significant at a later date. Okay, Miss Loretta, could you read 29 and 30?
Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed.
So that title didn't do him much good, did it?
No.
All right, so listen to this. The time for repentance had run out. Belshazzar had gone too far in profaning the holy vessels from God's temple. Destruction was closing in on him and all his drunken companions, even while Daniel's interpretation was taking place in the banquet hall. Let's see. Yeah, destruction was closing in on him and all his drunken companions while Daniel was giving his interpretation. That sentence was poorly constructed. The Medo-Persian troops were stealthily moving along the exposed riverbed under the cover of darkness and climbing the walls of the defenses, while revelry was going on throughout the city. So they snuck in through the riverbeds. You probably heard that story before.
Yeah.
They didn't come through the walls. They didn't try to go through the gates, but they stopped up the river and was able to sneak in on the dry riverbed underneath the walls. It's pretty
smart.
Pretty smart.
And a spy to know that ran under the kingdom.
This here was written 80 years after this happened. This next passage I'm going to read for you by Herodotus. He was one of the first, historians in history. Wrote books of history. All right, here he goes. Hereupon the Persians, who had been left for the purpose at Babylon by the riverside, entered the stream, which had now sunk so as to reach about midway up a man's thigh, and thus got into the town. Had the Babylonians been appraised of what Cyrus was about, or had they noticed their danger, they would never have allowed the Persians to enter the city, but would have destroyed them utterly, for they would have made fast all the street gates which gave upon the river, and mounting upon the walls along both sides of the stream, would so have caught the enemy as if it were a trap.
Yeah, they could have
Easily stopped them. But
They're too busy
They was
partying.
drunken.
yeah, here we go. But as it was, the Persians came upon them by surprise and took the city. Owing to the vast size of the place, the inhabitants of the central parts, as the residents at Babylon declare, long after the outer portions of the town were taken, knew nothing of what had chanced. But as they were engaged in a festival, continued dancing and reveling until they learnt the capture, but too certainly. So they figured it out too late. They're too busy partying to even know what was going on. How about that? Oh, let's see. And then verse 30 mentions again that Belshazzar was slain that night. Next, did you read verse 31? Or is there a verse 31 in yours?
31 down.
Yeah.
Okay, where Darius the Mede received the kingdom.
You want me to go ahead and read that one?
I don't remember if I told you to read it or not.
Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
So Darius the Mede, there's questions about who this guy is because you don't really see that name, Darius may be a title like Caesar, or something like that. So it could be the title that he bore, the Mede. And so there's historical names attached to that guy, and they're all in languages that I can't pronounce. So but you get the idea here. As soon as that chain goes around his neck, basically, the kingdom falls in that same night. The time for repentance had worn out. In other words, he should have learned from what his father had experienced. Now, here's application for us. Do we sometimes, through engaging in partying, miss out on how the world might be falling apart around us? Do you know somebody who avoids conflict or confrontation or facing the facts, and they just play all the time, or just joke all the time, or don't actually solve the difficult problems. They just kind of make light of it. Have you ever known somebody like that? Laura gets on to me sometimes because I'll make light of a serious situation as a way to kind of cope with it. But I think this is one thing that the entertainment industry has done to us. Is it's made us so captivated by these movie stars and sports, athletes and drama and everything else, and we miss what's actually going on because we're partying in a way. We're participating in fruitless entertainment when there's real work to be done in the world for the kingdom. It distracts us.
It doesn't have to be something from the outside either. I can party with something that I think is so important and put all my time into it when it's worthless.
That's right.
So I miss out the opportunities to serve him in a way that he wants me to serve. I should seek the Spirit's guidance instead of, hey, this is a good idea, God, will you bless it? I can't tell you how many times I prayed that. I have a good idea. Would you bless it and let me know if it's okay?
Oh, let's see. Oh, here we go. I can draw you something here. This is going to be a very sophisticated...
Stick man.
Yeah, basically.
Figure art.
Oh, I've been reading some here lately on social media and its effects and everything else. Now, this might not be the most beautiful drawing, but your time equals their money.
Absolutely.
The more that companies can distract you with scrolling through social media or through even just watching TV or whatever, more money they're making.
Yes.
And so they have entire meetings to talk about how to get people addicted to media, whether it's on the phone, which is the best way to do it, or whether it's on the computer or your tablet or your TV. I mean, they have meetings to see how they can get you to go. You know, all the camera switches, if you watch a TV show and you pay attention to every time the camera switches from one camera to the other, and you start to notice how often it does that to keep your attention. That's not just an artsy thing or whatever. It's a way for your brain to like continually be engaged in what's going on. It's like there's some movies that intentionally don't do that, you know, where they keep one continuous shot. There was a war movie a couple years ago, 1917, I think it was, and it's one continuous shot through the whole movie with no switches or anything. And you notice how different it is compared to what you're used to seeing. But even I was reading that the Facebook notification color used to be blue or something. Then they changed it to bright stoplight red, you know, and the interactions with that button went up so much when they changed the color to red because it catches your eye, you know. You see that flash of red, you go, oh man, I got to click on it, see what my buddies are saying. But when it was blue, people wouldn't really interact with it all that much. And so all these things they do to capture your attention. I mean, this is a $1 billion industry. Facebook is worth, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars. And they put all that money towards capturing our attention so they can increase ad revenue. Now, why does that matter? Because these social media companies and news companies and whatever, they know their audience because they've been collecting data on us, what we like, what we don't like, what we talk about when we're sitting around a table, you know. Have you ever been talking about something and then you go onto your phone or your computer and it gives you an ad for what you were just talking about with your friends? I know a lot of people have had that experience. So we're the product. The more time they capture of us, the more money they're making. Now, if everything that you see online, unless you've taken special steps to not allow them to have those capabilities, is curated specifically for you, are you ever going to read anything that you don't agree with? Are you ever going to come across something that that makes you think critically about a different position? Are you going to see any news that might shake, you know, your worldview or anything? Or are you going to keep seeing the stuff that makes you keep going back to that platform? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, what's happened? What's happened is a Daniel 5 situation. While we're engaged with things that make us happy, that make us feel like we're part of the in crowd, that make us feel comfortable and safe and secure, the world is falling to pieces around us. Yeah. What we should be doing, though, is engaging in the gospel of Jesus and being disciples of Christ. And
I had Apple News on my phone for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, it's terrible. It's 90% of it's about entertainment, which I blocked all of that.
Yeah.
But it was liberal, never anything positive. And I finally cut off my Apple News. I don't even get it anymore. I just figure what I don't know. It was awful. It would be so depressing if you read a lot of that stuff. It would be so depressing. There's
a website called allsides.com, and it gives you the headline or like the event that's happening. Just say it's something to do with the election. Well, the one I saw yesterday was a record number of early votes in Georgia, you know, or something like that. Well, you go and you look at their website, and they have a like a pH scale sort of looking thing, and it says left, center, and right, and then it gives you 3 headlines: one from the left, one from the center, one from the right, to show you like how each side is spinning the story. And you can tell sometimes by just looking at the headlines exactly what that company, whichever one it is, wants you to believe before you even click on it. Mm-hmm. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Yeah. You know, are we supposed to be agreeing with this or disagreeing with it? And you can tell just by the way they word the headline. Yeah. But all those things are ways of distracting us from the Persians and Medes that are going underneath the city gates.
That's right.
You know, and what we have to do as Christians, as part of the discipleship and a part of our discipleship in following Christ as His apprentices, is trying to overcome and reject some of those forms of entertainment, So maybe use them in a more responsible way and focus our time and efforts in becoming more like Jesus,
And we're so easily distracted. It's so easily.
Oh,
It is.
So easy to hook us.
It is. I've tried to limit my screen time. So myself, because you use your phone for everything, checking email, getting phone calls, getting text messages. I'm only trying to use my phone for phone calls and text messages. I've deleted every app that's distracting off of it, and I've blocked it so I can't even access it again unless I go through a bunch of hoops that would take forever to do. And then I'm trying to get my phone time use down to below like 30 minutes a day. So maybe use it for a map, or maybe have to look something up real quick. But besides that, I'm not using social media anymore on that thing. And the reason is because I think this industry of capturing our attention has caused so much problems. Mental health problems have skyrocketed since the advent of cell phones. Division in our country and across the world has increased because of these things, because you're just stuck in this echo chamber where you're only hearing what you want to hear.
Exactly.
And it's a Daniel 5 situation, and the handwriting's on the wall. And if we're going to be the people of Christ, we got to be able to rise up against that stuff. So,
if you watch this, I heard this the other day that the pharmaceutical companies are spending billions and billions of dollars on ads, and if you watch any ads on any TV, majority of them are for medicines.
Exactly.
Medicines.
you know that
The
people.
whole world must be sick. I've never seen so many.
and then when they say some side effects,
And it's a list.
It is
this
worse
way.
than.
and I said, oh, I want a gallon of that with a straw. I want to try that.
If you're, people that come from other countries, that's one of the things that they point out that they're shocked by is the amount of pharmaceutical ads.
Oh, it's unreal.
Because they go, well, how can we be trusted?
Yeah.
Like we don't know what any of that means. You got to, they trust their doctors over that kind of stuff.
Some food companies even put substances in the foods that they sell to make them addictive.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I think Dr. Pepper's got something in it. Just from personal experience.
I'm not drinking now, but that's always been my addiction, Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper, yeah, Laura's bad. I'm bad right now. I'll quit Dr. Pepper a couple times a year just to show myself I can do it.
Yeah.
I'll go a few months without drinking one, but if I start drinking them again, it's like,
Yeah.
Have an
It's like
Yeah.
you quit smoking. You use, I quit smoking for a week, but
Well,
then I sat down and smoked a whole pack of cans with no filter.
hey, does anybody have anything else on Daniel before we? Are we good?